Alright, my friends, let me show you how this character ends entire encounters in a single swing. We started a fight, notice that we've done no pre-buffing here, except this Elixir of Vigilance, just to make things easier to record, and Karlach Soul Coins, so our actual damage will be significantly higher in play. And then we're going to run in to the group of enemies and activate Tiger Heart Rage, making sure that our Tiger Heart swing can hit multiple enemies in a single attack, and then we're going to take our Tiger Heart swing. Take a reckless attack here, and sure, we'll take a guaranteed critical, and we'll do paralyzing critical as well. And we've knocked all three of these enemies prone. They are all bleeding, prone, and maimed, as well as having various stacks of reverberation and radiating orb and everything. One of them is paralyzed as well. And we could take another swing, but we don't need to. I'm just going to go ahead and pass the turn here, and you'll see what I mean, because these enemies can't get back up. Now, obviously, the Steel Watcher's immune to prone, so it's going to act. But when we get to the Flaming Fists turns, they have no movement left because they're maimed and they're prone on the ground, so they will not be able to get back up. And you can see that all they do is sit there and take a little bit more damage. Since we're still mad at them, we can go ahead and attack them again and end the fight, or of course we could have done that on the first turn. Alright, let's get to the build. Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering a build I'm calling the War Tiger. A character whose every attack is more powerful than the one before, allowing you to shred entire groups of enemies in a single swing. This character will break the ranks of your foes, tossing them aside and tearing them asunder while their broken bodies can do nothing to fight back, because every single attack that we make is an AoE stun. So in addition to our incredible damage, we also provide ludicrous amounts of crowd control, preventing enemies from ever fighting back. Not only that, we're incredibly tanky, and also are the most charming barbarian you'll ever meet, so this character makes an excellent party face, origin build for Karlach, or especially a Dark Urge build because of the revel in bloodshed that you take as you toss aside the broken bodies of your foes. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Eduardo Franco for the €5 donation, Tarantula for the $10, Wanda Husbando for the £5, and Demir Kupich and Natalia for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. Alright, let's shred some enemies. I'm using Karlach as the example character here, because not only is this a barbarian build, and she's the barbarian of the party, I also think this is a very flavorful build for Karlach. We know that she fought in the Blood War, and this character is heavily blood-themed, but also wants to charge directly into where the fighting is thickest, shattering enemy strong points and breaking their lines so that your allies can clean up at their leisure, which of course is exactly how Karlach wants to operate. This character also gets really solid dialogue skills, so I think it's especially good if you're playing Karlach as your main character, because you'll often want your main character to be doing the dialogue for your party, and so this makes a great Karlach origin run. I think this character is really nice as well for a Dark Urge build. It fits very well thematically for a Dark Urge, so you can build that, and the invisibility can be, from the Dark Urge cloak, can be especially powerful with a character that gets as many kills as this one does. If you're building this as a custom character, what race you pick mostly doesn't matter. You get all of your weapon and armor proficiencies from class levels, so we don't need those from race, but you can gain some benefits by taking Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf for the extra movement speed. Extra mobility is even better on this character than it usually is on melee characters, because we want to position so we're hitting multiple enemies with a single attack, which means that we can use some extra movement to make sure we're getting into the right positions in combat. Half Orc can do extra damage on critical hits, and we're making every attack with advantage and have critical hit bonuses, so we'll get those very frequently. Half Orc can give you quite a bit of extra damage. Or Halfling or Gnome are always excellent choices. Gnome's advantage on mental saving throws gets rid of one of the very few weaknesses of the build, because we're going to pretty much ignore most physical damage, so advantage on mental saves us from having any other potential for things to go wrong, and Halfling, of course, rerolls ones, which means even more critical hits, and just succeeding more often at the things that you're trying to do over the course of the playthrough. Now, at first level, we're actually not starting with a level of Barbarian, but instead starting with our good old pal, the Hexblade Warlock dip. This will allow us to attack using our charisma instead of our strength with our hexed melee weapon, which is going to let us key everything that this character is doing off of one attribute, charisma. Not only will this let us increase our damage output significantly, it also boosts our save DCs, and we're going to be applying a lot of effects that key off of your spell save DC, so having high charisma is going to let this character lock down enemies significantly more easily. What's more than that, though, we're going to be using an aspect of Hexblade Warlock that rarely gets used. Hexblade's Curse is a very, very powerful tool, and allows you to increase the damage output and critical hit chance against enemies by casting it as a bonus action. However, with your hexed weapon, you also have a 20% chance to apply Hexblade's Curse every time you hit an enemy. This normally doesn't come up that often because a 20% chance is not that reliable, but because every single one of this character's attacks is an AoE attack, the chance of us applying Hexblade's Curse to enemies is much, much higher. So we're going to be able to apply Hexblade's Curse for free to a lot of enemies because we're rolling so many 20% chances to get this to trigger. And we also do tons and tons of damage instances with every attack because we're stacking up so much extra damage. Each time we do that extra damage, it's going to trigger the extra damage from Hexblade's Curse. So the extra damage that we get is going to be significantly higher than just our proficiency bonus because we'll be doing that proficiency bonus damage more times per turn or many times per attack. Also, we get free healing because we're going to be applying these Hexblade's Curses very frequently, making this character even tankier. So, of course, as our subclass, we're taking Hexblade, and for our cantrip selection, we're going to take Eldritch Blast and Booming Blade. Now, while we can't use either of these while raging, and obviously, as a barbarian, a lot of fights we're going to be raging, there are also fights where you don't have a rage charge or don't want to spend one, and these are incredibly powerful tools. Eldritch Blast gives us a very strong ranged attack, meaning that if there's a fight where it's better to play at range, or if the character can't reach enemies on the first turn, you still have really good things to do by using your ranged attack. And Booming Blade is just an absurdly powerful tool for damage output. In any fight where you're not raging, this will increase your damage output against single targets significantly, either by pushing them away from you or moving away from them to trigger the damage when they move, or just from the extra flat damage that it gets at later levels. So these give you amazing tools for when you're not currently raging. For our spell selection, we're going to take Shield, which not only is this the best defensive tool in the game, thanks to a weird bug where Shield doesn't count as casting a spell, you can activate this spell while raging. So you can even use this defensive tool in order to block enemy attacks even while you're raging, so it gives you even more options to use your shield here. And then we have a choice of our second spell as to whether we'll take Armor of Agathys or Hex. In general, I like taking Hex because we won't get higher level spell slots for a while, and level 1 Armor of Agathys isn't that good, whereas having Hex means that when we're fighting at range, we can use Hex, use Eldritch Blast, and still do extremely respectable damage, even when we're not spending a rage charge. For our ability score selection, because this is going to be a charisma-based attacker, we're going to take 16 starting charisma and 16 starting dexterity. We don't need any intelligence, so we can dump that down to 8, take 14 constitution, and take 12 wisdom. This character can also benefit significantly from using Ethel's Hair, so if you are using Ethel's Hair on this character, you can drop your wisdom down to 10 and take 17 starting charisma. This will let you hit 20 charisma, spending only 1 ability score improvement, so lets you get that feat for another tool elsewhere. But this character doesn't need it, it just benefits from it, so for the demo, I'm gonna show you the non-Ethel's Hair build. Just remember that you can use that if you want to get an extra feat. For our skill selection, we can take dialogue skills because this character is going to have really high charisma, and the great thing is that we are a barbarian as well, and so with high charisma and intimidation proficiency, we can really hammer the barbarian's unique dialogue options. There's several dialogue options in the game where if you're a barbarian, you get an intimidation check And usually the difficulty class on that Intimidate check is set very low, because the game assumes barbarians don't have charisma. But if you're a barbarian with lots of Riz, then you can intimidate enemies really, really reliably. So it makes you actually a very good party face, thanks to the barbarian unique dialogue and just having naturally good dialogue checks. That's all the decisions we have to make at level 1, so let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we're immediately leaving Warlock and taking a level of Barbarian. We want to get our powerful Barbarian abilities online as soon as possible, and all we need from Warlock at the moment is the ability to attack using our charisma, so we want to take Barbarian as quickly as we can. This gets us Rage, which makes us significantly tankier, in addition to having medium armor and shield proficiency and the shield spell. We can now have damage resistance, so this character is extremely hard to kill in the early game. We also have great hit points, thanks to Barbarians giving us extra HP. And so this just makes us a really powerful combatant in the early levels. If you're building this character from level 1, then you benefit a lot from how powerful these early levels are. Both Hexblade and Barbarian are great level 1 combatants. At level 3, we're taking our second level of Barbarian, which gets us Reckless Attack. This is going to let us make every single attack that we make with advantage, which is obviously incredible for hitting our attacks and for applying all of our extra damage and everything, but also works extremely well with Hexblade's Curse. As a Hexblade, when you have cursed an enemy, you have additional chance to critically hit that enemy. So making attacks with advantage and bonus critical hit chance means that you are vastly more likely to get critical hits, both for extra damage and for the effects that we're going to use that trigger off of critical hits. It also lets you bait enemies into attacking you, and then, even though they're attacking with advantage, you can often convert a hit into a miss using the shield spell. So it's even better on this character for manipulating enemy aggro than it normally is, which is already, obviously, a very powerful tool. At character level 4, we're continuing to level in Barbarian, and we get to take our Barbarian subclass. The subclass that we're going to take, as you can probably guess from the name, is Wildheart Barbarian for Tigerheart. Tigerheart Barbarian gets us a couple things. So, we get additional jump distance, which is pretty useful. This character has low strength, so this is going to double our jump distance effectively, meaning that we're still very mobile while we're raging, and also allow us to use Tiger's Bloodlust. Tiger's Bloodlust turns our normal attack into an AoE attack that can hit up to 7 enemies. It reduces the damage that we do or up to 3 enemies, excuse me. I don't know why I said 7 there. It reduces the damage that you do by half, but the damage that gets halved is only the natural damage from the weapon. They've actually fixed the calculations in the tooltip here. So you can see that we do 1d10 divided by 2, and if we critically hit, that damage will also be divided by 2, but is still a pretty nice additional amount of damage. But so that damage is halved, but additional damage, like the 1d6 damage from the Helldust gloves that we have equipped, or the extra damage that we have from raging, or damage that we apply from Hexblade's Curse, or damage that we apply from other effects like that, are not halved. We're going to do the full damage on every single attack. We also cause enemies to bleed, and there's no saving throw on this. They just automatically become bleeding if you attack them with Tiger's Bloodlust. So you can set enemies bleeding, which reduces their Constitution saves, making them even more likely to fail saves against all of the effects we have that target Constitution, and also do amazing damage to groups of enemies. Since we're swinging with an AoE on every attack, we're going to be applying Hexblade's Curse naturally to lots and lots of enemies, so we'll get the extra damage there, and with Hexblade's Curse and AoE attacks rolling tons of dice and advantage on our attacks, this will give us massive numbers of critical hits to trigger effects that care about crits, and also just to deal way more damage. So this lets us the synergy here gives us an absurdly powerful crowd control factory, and also an amazing amount of damage. We can also use it to heal by killing enemies, or with weapons that gain health when we attack an enemy as well, or other really cool on-hit effects, which I'll discuss more in the item section. At character level 5, we're taking our 4th level of Barbarian, and we get our first feat. Now, there's a few options for feats here, and honestly, any of them are very good. Alert, of course, is always amazing on Honor mode. This character can skip out on Alert because we're a Barbarian, so we're going to get the initiative bonus from Feral Instinct. But it's still just an amazing boost to your character, and if you have a party that's especially demanding for initiative gear, then you can still consider taking Alert. An ability improvement for Charisma is of course always good. Extra hit chance and damage is obviously amazing in every circumstance, but the feat that I'm going to recommend taking is Great Weapon Master. We're going to be using a two-handed weapon for most of the game, and Great Weapon Master increases our damage output enormously. But even more importantly, as a Tiger Barbarian, the extra 10 damage from Great Weapon Master is not halved, so we can apply Great Weapon Master to up to 3 enemies per swing. And the bonus action attacks when we land critical hits, which we're going to do really frequently, or when we kill enemies, which we're also going to do really frequently, are incredibly powerful as well, giving us tons and tons of extra attacks. So very synergistic with Tiger Barbarian, because they can be up to plus 30 damage per attack from Great Weapon Master alone, if you're hitting 3 enemies. And also you're going to trigger the extra bonus action attack pretty much every turn, very, very reliably, so just makes this an amazing feat for the character. Then, at Barbarian level 5, we have no particular decisions to make, but we do get fast movement, which is obviously great. This character, one downside is that you will often want to stand in a very specific spot, because if enemies are arranged in a certain way where you need to stand in a specific place in order to hit multiple of them with the small AoE from Tiger Barbarian, that can cost you extra movement compared to normal melee characters who just need to close to base contact. So the extra mobility here is really, really good, and obviously extra attack is incredible, doubling your damage output, letting you use multiple Tiger Slashes every turn, fish for more crits, apply more Hexblade's curses. Extra attack, you know, you don't need me to tell you that this is good, but it's good. At character level 7, we get to take our 6th level of Barbarian, getting an animal aspect. And, of course, because we're the Tiger Barbarian, we're going to take aspect of the beast, Wolverine. This gives us, whenever you attack a bleeding or poisoned target, you also maim it for 1 turn. And remember, every one of our attacks makes any enemy capable of bleed. So we will always apply this maim. And the way that the game interprets it, it applies both the bleed and the maim on the first attack, because it checks whether they're bleeding, or it applies the bleeding and then checks whether they're bleeding or not after that. So you get the maim from the first attack, you don't have to attack enemies twice. Maim gives enemies 0 movement speed, which of course locks them in place next to your character, but it's even better than that, because in Baldur's Gate 3, in order to stand up from prone, enemies have to use half of their movement speed. If they have no movement speed because they're maimed, they can't stand up. And in BG3, if you are lying prone, you are fully stunned and can't do anything. So as long as we have a way to knock enemies prone, which we will using our items, then we will apply maim to them and stun them on every single attack. The way that we're going to knock enemies prone is with Reverberation, which will, when it stacks up to 5 charges, give enemies a con save or be knocked prone. Remember, they're making this con save at disadvantage because they're bleeding. And possibly with the Intransigent Warhammer, which will knock enemies prone whenever we critically hit, which we're doing all the time, or kill enemies, which we're doing all the time. So every attack is going to knock enemies prone and apply bleeding and maimed to them, stunning them and preventing them from acting. At character level 8, we get to take our 7th level of Barbarian, which gets us one of the most underrated but most powerful class features in the entire game, Feral Instinct. This is 3/5 of the alert feat, so it's going to let us skip out on taking alert so we can get an extra feat and still win initiative. With 16 dexterity and Feral Instinct, we have +6 to our initiative. We probably want a little bit more than that for honor mode, so you're going to want to dedicate 1 piece of initiative gear to this character. But with a piece of initiative gear, you can beat almost every enemy in terms of going first in combat, and then when you go first, they don't go second because you've knocked them prone and maimed them, so they're unable to get back up and you've stunned them. That's even assuming that they survive all of the damage that we're doing with every single attack. Feral Instinct is a great ability, obviously, and this also gets us to closer to Barbarian level 8, where we can take another feat, so we're just taking the next Barbarian level right away. At character level 9, we're taking our 8th level of Barbarian to get our second feat, although I should mention that if you're playing on Tactician mode or lower, if you're not playing on Honor mode, then instead of taking 8 levels of Barbarian here, you should take 4 more levels of Warlock, because the extra attack from Pact of the Blade Warlock stacks with Barbarian extra attacks, so you'll get 3 attacks per round on lower difficulty settings. On Honor mode, those 2 sources of extra attack don't stack, so we are not going to take a 5th level of Warlock because we don't need it, but on Tactician mode or below, a 3rd attack is better than anything else you can get, so you're going to want to take 5 Warlock levels. For the Honor mode build, we're taking an 8th level of Barbarian here, and we're going to grab a feat, and the feat that we're going to take is just an ability score improvement to boost our Charisma. Getting our hit chance and damage up is obviously exactly what we need, and this also boosts our save DC for every effect that keys off of our actual character's spell save DC. Now that we've gotten that second feat, we no longer need anything in particular from Barbarian. Now, you can take more Barbarian levels. Brutal Critical does increase your damage output, though remember you get half value on this while you're in Tiger Barbarian Rage, so it's less impactful for Tiger Barbarians than other Barbarians. But I think we're better off just taking more levels of Warlock in order to get another feat, and also this gives us even more tools for winning combats in the late game, because we get the game-winning Darkness Abuse for fights where we don't want to use range or want to use rage or want to fight at range. At level 2 Warlock, we get to take a spell, another spell here, and the spell that we're going to take is Armor of Agathis. You can spend a spell slot on this, and it will give you 5 temp HP, which will last all day until it gets broken, and since this character is going to be up in melee, Armor of Agathis is a worthwhile investment. And you can have the damage that enemies do to it using rage if they're doing physical damage. Obviously, by this level, it's not going to last for more than 1 hit, but it's still a nice little survivability and damage boost in some scenarios. And then for our Eldritch Invocation, we're going to be taking Devil's Sight, because we will be able to use Darkness very powerfully. If you have a Darkness synergy party, this character can work with it, makes you completely immune to ranged attacks. It also gives you a totally additional play pattern if you want to. There's lots of fights, even in the late game, where enemies can't deal with a party just huddling up in a darkness cloud and shooting them, and so if you have Devil's Sight, that gives you the option to do that. And we'll take Agonizing Blast as well to give us a more powerful ranged option for those fights. In the late game, there are some combat arenas where having a ranged attack is really helpful, so Agonizing Blast is very good for that. If you know you're never going to make ranged attacks, in particular, if you've taken the Illithid Fly ability, which gives this character a lot more mobility, then you can take Repelling Blast instead, because it gives you more control over enemy movement, and Agonizing Blast is less useful if you're always going to be making melee attacks, which of course are your preferred method of attacking. At level 11, we're taking Warlock level 3, and we get another spell here, and the spell that we're going to take is, of course, Darkness. Darkness is, we just talked about how good it is with Devil's Sight, becoming completely immune to ranged attacks, giving enemies disadvantage on their attacks if they do close to melee. So it gives you another tool in this character's arsenal. Obviously, you can't use this at the same time that you are raging, but there are fights where you want to fight at range, so Darkness is a great thing to have in your back pocket, and you can still abuse it against some encounters once you know the mechanics a little bit more. For our Pact Boon here, if you are playing on Tactician mode or below and taking 5 levels of Warlock, you have to take Pact of the Blade to get the extra attack. Since this character is not taking 5 levels of Warlock, it doesn't really matter what we take here. Pact of the Chain is a little less useful at this point in the game, but still pretty powerful, and Pact of the Tome gets you Vicious Mockery and Thorn Whip. These really are not super impactful. Chain is a little more useful, but I'm going to take Pact of the Tome anyways, because Vicious Mockery is just funny to cast, and it gives you an extra option to annoy your enemies. And then finally, at character level 12, we're taking our 4th level of Warlock here to get another feat, and the feat that we're going to take is an ability score improvement. If you're using the Ethel's Hair build and already have 20 charisma at this point, there's a couple other options that are really powerful for this character. Savage Attacker is a little less useful for us because a lot of the damage dice that we're rolling are halved, so Savage Attacker is less impactful, but we're still rolling a lot of damage dice, so it's still very powerful for this character. Sentinel can keep enemies locked down next to you and stop enemy movement if you want to lean even more into the crowd control aspects. Polearm Master can get you off-turn attacks if you're using a polearm. Mobile is always good. Extra movement speed is incredible on this character, so there's a lot of solid options. Or you could take something like Lucky or Mage Slayer, which are always good, or Tough. Is an option as well. Any of those can really help out. I think of these, I would recommend Savage Attacker because more damage is still just always good for this character, and we do roll enough damage dice to make it good if you're using the Ethel's Hair build, but any of those are solid options. For this character, for this version of the build where we're not using Ethel's Hair, we're just going to max out our charisma, of course. For our cantrip selection here, we're going to take True Strike to annoy people in the YouTube comments. Although I will mention that Minor Illusion is actually very solid for this character. You can Minor Illusion to group enemies up, then they'll all be standing together, so you can Tiger Barbarian AoE them down, and then this character can do that by grouping them out of combat with Minor Illusion. But it gets people every time when we take True Strike, so we're doing that. And for our spell selection here, there's really not that much that's important to grab, but Misty Step is still always a useful mobility tool for combats where you're not raging, so you can pick that up. You can take Hold Person for guaranteed critical hits. A Booming Blade critical hit is pretty powerful. So again, when you're not raging, you can benefit from that as well. And that is the build, and I hope that it lets you shatter the ranks of your enemies in honor mode. But of course, we can improve the build even further with items, and we get to use some items that you don't normally get to do. So let's take a look at those. For items for this character, there are honestly so many good items that this character is so good at using that you can equip it in a large number of very different ways. So I'm going to talk you through a couple different possible ways to equip the character and what some of the best items are to use, especially some of the items that aren't seen in a lot of builds, but that are incredible in this one. Let's start with our weapon. So we have a lot of different weapon options for this character. Firstly, you can just go with the highest damage output option, something like the Hellfire Great Axe. What you're looking for here, if you are looking for maximum damage, is weapons that have additional damage riders, because the base damage of the weapon will be halved when you're doing your Tiger Barbarian swing, but the extra d6 of fire damage from the Hellfire Great Axe, for example, will not be. So any weapon that has extra damage every time it hits is incredibly powerful for this character. We also can benefit from any weapon that has cool on-hit effects. So you can use something like the Skin Burster for a more defensive version of the character. If you're hitting 2 enemies, even just 2 enemies instead of the maximum of 3, you get 2 turns of Force Conduit for each of the 2 enemies that you hit. If you do that twice with extra attack, you get the full 8 turns of Force Conduit and stack this all the way up to maximum, giving you a significant amount of damage reduction. So this character can be extremely difficult to kill if you use the Skin Burster. Another great option, if you want to be difficult to kill, is the Sword of Chaos. Not only does this have extra damage riders with the extra d4 of necrotic damage, it also heals you for a d6 HP every time you hit enemies. So this gives you a significant amount of healing because we're hitting enemies in an AoE. And so any weapon with a cool on-hit effect like this is incredible for this character. However, my favorite weapon for the character is the Intransigent Warhammer. This gives enemies a con save or they get knocked prone within a 10-foot AoE of you every single time you kill an enemy or get a critical hit. So the Intransigent Warhammer is just wildly more chances to knock enemies prone, guaranteeing that you're going to splatter them onto the ground. So any of these 4 options or any other weapon with a neat on-hit effect that you think it would be fun to use on multiple enemies at once is great for this character. Another weapon worth mentioning is, of course, Falar Louv. While you can have this character wield it and use Shriek, and you'll get the Shriek damage on all of the enemies that you're hitting, plus on the Reverberation and the Hexblade's Curse and everything, especially on lower difficulty settings. This can be a ludicrous amount of extra damage, because Falaraluv's Shriek does an extra d4 of thunder damage on every damage instance. It's also especially good if you have an ally carrying Falaraluv for you, because then you can use it for the extra damage alongside one of these weapons that you want to be using. Another awesome option for a weapon, if you want to build around it for this character, is to use the Punch-Drunk Bastard. This obviously involves getting drunk, and you're going to want the Amulet of the Drunkard if you're doing this to extend the duration of drunk effects to 5, to increase that so you can actually use the Punch-Drunk Bastard. But the 10-foot AoE D4 of thunder damage and permanent advantage on all of your attacks is incredible. The thunder damage is going to apply Reverberation, and you'll get massive amounts of additional damage. It'll apply Hexblade's Curse as well, knocking enemies prone. So the Punch-Drunk Bastard lets you just explode all over your enemies. Get your jokes out in the comments below, and just knock them all over the place. The best thing to pair with this is these wine goblets also, which you can buy from the Tavern Keeper in Act 3. And these you can consume without spending a bonus action. Normally alcohol you have to drink for a bonus action. In Act 3, these wine goblets become available and you can drink them for free. So those are our weapon options. Any of these 4 or the drunk setup are incredible for this character. Another great amulet is the Surgeon's Subjugation Amulet. We're going to be getting constant critical hits, and guaranteeing even more criticals means that you can paralyze enemies to stun them, knock them prone, feed critical hits to yourself off of them to trigger the Intransigent Warhammer and Great Weapon Master attacks again. So having paralyzed enemies where you can guarantee criticals is incredibly strong for us. For rings, you're looking for things that have on-hit effects. So the Caustic Band does extra damage on every attack. And another really awesome one for this character is the Ring of Spiteful Thunder. We're going to be using Reverberation gear and dealing thunder damage on every attack. So the Ring of Spiteful Thunder will also daze all of our enemies in addition to the other effects that we're landing on them. Speaking of doing thunder damage on every attack and dazing enemies, we've got the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, and the Boots of Stormy Clamor. These are the best in slot for this character. They're not mandatory. You don't need the reverb stuff in order to make this character strong, but it does help a lot. So you can, if you have these on another character, don't despair. There's plenty of alternative options. But stacking Reverberation effect to knock enemies prone is obviously amazing, reduces their con saves, so they're going to fail saves against everything else even more frequently. We're going to do thunder damage on every attack for the gloves, and we apply a condition on every attack for the boots, because enemies will be bleeding and maimed after every single attack that we make. So the Boots of Stormy Clamor and Gloves of Belligerent Skies will stack tons of Reverberation stacks on every attack. Speaking of doing thunder damage, of course, to make that happen, we want to use the Drakethroat Glaive to enchant whatever weapon we're using with an extra d4 of thunder damage. That way we get all of these effects and the Ring of Spiteful Thunder, if we're using that, on every single attack. So the Drakethroat Glaive is incredible for us to trigger all of our debuffs. With Draconic Elemental Weapon, you get an extra d4 damage of your elemental damage of your choice, and thunder damage not only is the least resisted damage in the game, but triggers all of our special effects that we're trying to achieve. You can add the Callous Glow Ring to this for extra radiant damage to trigger the gloves as well, but it's not necessary. So if you have another Radiating Orb character, you can definitely use it on that one instead, or if you have like a Magic Missile character or something, then you can split up the gear across multiple characters. If you are using the Callous Glow Ring, the Luminous Armor is a really nice pairing, obviously, because that's going to trigger a bunch of Radiating Orbs as well. If you're not using the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, then for your glove slot, the Helldusk Gloves are going to be best in slot. Plus, save DC is incredible for locking down enemies, and the extra d6 of fire damage will be applied to every enemy that you hit with your Tiger Swing. The Martial Exertion Gloves can also give you extra attacks, so those are also a great option. For your helmet, the Birthright hat is always a solid option for every charisma-based character, of course. That's what we're keying all of our stuff off of, so more charisma means more good, and the Birthright hat is going to be great. Another great option is the Mask of Soul Perception. Increasing your attack rolls and initiative rolls means you'll go before enemies, and land your devastating attacks even more frequently, so the Mask of Soul Perception is great. It also just looks really cool when Karlach is wearing it and on fire. Finally, of course, I need to mention one of my favorite items, the Helmet of Grit. This character does want multiple bonus actions. This can let you rage and cast Hexblade's Curse in the same round, rage and then use a Great Weapon Master attack in the same round, use multiple Great Weapon Master attacks, and so on. So the Helmet of Grit is still incredible if you want to play at half health. For your armor, you have a couple choices. If you're not using the luminous armor, you just want the best defensive armor that you can get. The Armor of Agility gives you additional saving throws, which are a weak point for this character, so boosting your saving throws is very helpful. And lets you have pretty high AC as well, making you pretty tanky in combination with the ability to cast Shield as well. This actually makes it very difficult for enemies to hit you, even with advantage when you're using Reckless Attack. Or you can use the Flame Enameled armor. This gives you +2 to initiative, which is great, and gives you resistance to fire damage and cold damage as well if you use the Fire Shield. You can use Armor of Agathis and the Fire Shield to have a retaliation damage sub-theme going on, while also boosting your saving throws and initiative. Finally, for our bow, increases to your critical hit chance are really good for this character, so the Deadshot is excellent. Or if you have neither of these other two pieces of initiative gear, the Hellrider Longbow is always awesome, but the Deadshot is what I would recommend because passive boost to your critical hit chance means that you're going to trigger this character's unique effect even more frequently. If you're playing Karlach specifically, Soul Coins are awesome. They do apply their full damage to every Tiger Barbarian swing, so you get a ton of extra damage. And because it's a separate damage instance, it also applies Hexblade's Curse damage again. So you're going to do even more Hexblade damage. And then also I should mention one thing that you shouldn't use is Strength Elixirs, though the charisma-based attacks from your hexed weapon override the strength-based attacks from strength elixirs, so you'll use charisma anyways. And unlike a normal hexblade where you can just choose not to hex your weapon, this character needs to do that because you actually really care about applying the Hexblade's Curse passively with the % chance to do that. So don't bother with strength elixirs on this character. Use a viciousness elixir for extra crit chance or a vigilance elixir for extra initiative instead. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the War Tiger, and I hope that you enjoy slaughtering your foes and leaving them broken and bleeding on the ground. Of course, if you have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.